Hi, and welcome to Mr. Wilson Teaches Watercolor Introductory Using a Bird. So today I'm going to teach you how to use watercolors to fill in a basic drawing. So I chose a bird, which I drew from this book, How to Draw Birds in Simple Steps. You can find pretty much anything. So you'll need a piece of watercolor paper, a set of watercolors, a variety of brushes, typically smaller sizes, as well as your water. And you can follow along step by step. Okay, so the first step of this project is just drawing out your creature. I'm choosing a bird for this specific one, but really you can draw out anything. A lot of people when they watercolor will just go right into the watercolor, but I'm going to leave a faint line drawing so that I can work on top of something. You got to be careful when you use the pencil because a lot of that will show up in the final drawing. So you just got to press very, very, very lightly and give yourself some guidelines. So this book called How to Draw Birds in Simple Steps, they have these online tutorials. You can pretty much look up whatever you like. In this particular one, I'm going to be using this bird. So it gives me some general shapes to follow, and then as I can work my way in and fill in, and you can see they have even what the underpainting would look like, followed by the black and white, and then the color version. So it's a really good reference book for me. So I'm just going to start by sort of sketching out what they've got labeled here for me. Try to size it all up, so I'm just going to start by putting in general shapes that they've got. These are basic shapes. You can pretty much break up any animal into these circles, cylinders, cones, and triangles, squares. And I can adjust these sort of as I go. And also no one's going to end up seeing this picture, so I'm not really honestly too concerned if it's perfect or not. I think my beak actually looks a little high, so let's bring that down. And then roughly where those feet will come through. This branch actually split off here. Okay, I'm going to erase out some of these guidelines. Alright, so using this as a rough guideline, I know it's hard to see on the camera, but I've got more or less the shape that I want and I'm going to work with. I'll adjust some of these as I go based off the picture. I already tell you this actually needs to be a little further back here. So some of these you'll see me just change on the spot. You can spend more time on your drawing if you're worried about for the hand-eye that goes behind that. So whenever I do watercolor, one of the first things I think about is which parts are going to be the lightest to darkest. So for me, I always find it's easiest to do the lightest first and sort of work my way into the darks, because you can always go darker. Very hard to go lighter without being able to lift off a lot of that paint. So I usually start just by picking out all my white spots, and I lay down some water right into those spots. And I know it sounds silly to just paint with water because you're not actually laying down a color, but what this does is it saturates the paper and it makes it really easy to blend on top, and it makes all of it match, and you don't get a lot of those dry brush marks unless that's the effect you're going for. I'm also going to put some into the wings. Basically anywhere I see that's sort of a lighter tone, I'm going to go through and add in some water. And then the next color that I make is my light gray. I'm going to pull in switch these. Let's see what I'm doing mixing the colors here. I'm just going to be adding a little bit of black into there. Like I said, you won't be able to see. A lot of the pencil lines as they're being covered up, and because I already laid down some of that lighter color, notice I'm not getting a ton of dry brush marks because I've got a layer of water on there already. So to be honest with you, watercolor, you can spend hours and hours getting every single line perfect. One of the interesting things about watercolor is you can't really go back, so a lot of times people will find beauty in a lot of different mistakes and sort of letting the paint do what it wants. So if it's your first time, you shouldn't stress about making this perfect. Usually lay down just some color fields, block in some of the areas, go back and refine it later, and so just hope for the best there. And a lot of times you'll find something that looks pretty beautiful with the way that the paint pulls out each color. This is part glazing over here. I'm adding in some layers of color knowing that I'm going to go back into this eventually. Be able to change some of those colors if I need to. You can see it's much darker in this part of the wing. I usually wait till the end to do black, but I know I want this to merge a little bit with the rest in there. I'm going to go a little darker than I normally do right off the bat in this area. You can see there should be a white spot there, so I went a little overboard in this area with the gray, so I'm going to see if I can pull some of this out. By adding water to it, I can lift some of that color right back out. Soften it up a little bit. There we go, that's less gray. More white. And you can see there's a hint of brown in that area as well. I'm going to pull some brown into my gray. And some brown in here too, some white washes. There's also some brown in the eye. Way down. Start with that and let that dry up and see what it looks like in a minute. I'm going to start pulling out some of these greens, so I have to make this color first. So this starts with a basic green. I know it's hard to tell, but there actually is a little bit of brown in there. I'm going to pull out some of these warmer colors. And then by adding in the yellow, I can get it to look more like that chartreuse color. Alright, there we go. I'll start by adding this in. It's much darker towards the edges, so I'm going to pull this darker green on the edge. Down, back to our gray. And merge these two a little better. Same with this brown color. Alright, I'm going to pull out some yellow and merge some of this green in there and just give it a little bit of that, quite a bit more water. Start just basically by getting a flat wash of color into all of this area. Goes all the way up into the head here. This is still wet enough I can get them to blend pretty easily. I'm going to go a little bit darker underneath here, just give it that shading effect. And a little darker towards where it's going to turn black. Alright, now that this is dry, I can glaze over with some more color, so I'm taking a darker tone. And we'll start to pull in some more color. Follow this edge, and it looks like it sort of fades in, almost like color changes within the feathers. And the wetter this is, the more fade you'll get, so keep in mind fairly dry so I can make some texture marks in there. And this is about the same color that I need to pull up all the way through here. Remember, you can always go darker, so I'm starting with a pretty gray color. I'm going to go back in with black and fix it up as I go. Alright, so there's my first layer. Now I'm going to go through and darken it up a little bit. Getting more black into this water. Alright, let's tackle the beak for a little bit. So I'm going to go in with some black. Try to crisp this up a little bit. There's some hint of brown in there as well, so let's pull the brown in. I'm going to switch to a really fine brush to get the black in the inner part of the eye. I'm going to try to leave a little white spot as well. See, that really makes a difference in there, some of these fine tuning. And adding the proper line work in. I'm also going to use this same brush to work on the feet a little bit, just to pull the lines through. Detail work in there. Alright, let's move on to the branch. So I'm going to start just by giving this a little bit of color. There we go. Back to the feet here. Let's give this a second to dry up actually. While that's drying up, I'm going to do some touch-ups with this darker color in here. Okay, we're going to go back to the feet now that's had some time to dry. Let's try and get in where these are attached here. Alright, so that's some basics of the watercolor. You can watch some of our other videos and we'll talk about different techniques, things you can do in the background. I'll spend some more time shaping up a lot of the colors and forms and feet, working on once it's dried, adding some more texturing. But that's really the basics of how to work the watercolor into a piece. Remember, if this is your first time, happy mistakes. Don't stress out. It's just watercolor, and with practice you will get better at it as you add in layer after layer after layer. So good luck.